Head to the back with our Hope Kids, and those that want to help, those are in the back, those are planning to help. Again, we're grateful for all those that serve here, and looking for a great month as we continue to just reach out into the community. And so we talk a lot about walking with people in life and sharing the hope of Christ, and we talk about what that looks like. And so if you think about, a lot of churches have what they call as outreach programs, where they're just trying to let people, kind of a come and see kind of thing. Well, we really want to adopt, and we don't want to practice outreach. We want to be reaching out, and always. And so we want to be making disciples. And so this is seen in different phases, in different ways. But that's really what this sermon series is about this month. And so a couple things last week, we talked about really just a 30,000-foot view. I gave a lot. It was so much information. I saw somebody collapse as they were leaving the church. Because it took 8 years for us to develop this plan, and in 30 minutes, I got it out all in one time. And there's people sucking water. They were like, man, I don't know if I can handle this, right? It's a lot of information. But really, I think from a church perspective, we understand that we do have a plan. We have a plan. We're not doing missions. We're on mission. And God has planted us here to be on mission in our community, to this community and beyond. And so we're looking to do that, to be faithful in that. And so God has brought people to help encourage, bless us in that, but we're still on mission, and we want to be on mission. And so we took a 30,000-foot view, and today we're going to kind of bring it down into a little more reality. What does it mean to reach out? So there's always the idea, the big pie-in-the-sky idea, right? So a couple times when I have tried to reach out to people, like I'll hear a preacher get up and talk about door knocking or knocking on someone's door and them coming to know Jesus, and that person becomes a preacher and moves to Africa and reaches 1 million people, and you're like, man, I'm going to do it. So I go knock on the door. I get cussed out by some lady that doesn't want me there, or, you know what I mean? Like, it never goes the way I hear all these great stories. It's like, it's usually a nightmare story, and like, why did I get myself into this situation, right? I don't know if I'm the only one. Now, I am a introvert. Like, I'd rather be left alone. Like, seriously. Like, when God says go, it's like, oh, really? Me? Can somebody else go? Like, anybody else, right? And so, but that go means me too. And so reaching out, my job, God has called me to walk with him and to share and to show other people what it means to walk with Christ. So that's in my everyday living. And then also in intentional opportunities that God has given me. And the truth is, there's so many opportunities that I walk past that I'll miss a lot of these. So as we think through this, so one thing that helped me this last few years that's really helped me is I've kind of gotten to really be goal setting. Like, I've personally began to think it's not just a New Year's resolution thing, just even personally. And as I've set these goals and worked towards those goals, I've seen God do great things in my life and just in that. And so one example, many of you know that we did a marathon. Some of the residents did a marathon. I did my first triathlete, half Ironman thing the other day, so 2 weeks ago or so. And so it was one of the things that a year ago, we decided, Jordan and I, we were sitting there, nothing to do. My wife wasn't around, so we're like, hey, let's find something hard to do. And so he's like, let's do it, right? Let's do this Ironman. I'm like, let's do it. And so he was wanting to do this Olympic one, and I'm like, let's do the Beast Man. Let's do the full half one, right? Let's do that. And so we began to make a plan. And this kind of sets another guideline that I've created for myself. And this has to do with reaching out, because the same commitment in reaching out is the same commitment that it takes to fulfill the commitments that you make, right? So the same idea. And so this is my own personal guideline that I'm living by. And I heard a radio, and then I've had other people coach me through this, but this is what I've come up with. So every year I'm going to try to do something physically, spiritually, and emotionally difficult that helps me focus on my faith, my values, my life, and my family. And so as you're doing something that's physically exhausting, like, you begin to question every decision you ever made in life. Like, why am I doing this? Who got me to do this, right? You just begin to question that. And so this is, there was some things that came out in this. First of all, as I made that goal, like, I'm going to finish this half Ironman, I began to focus on some things. I began to be intentional about what I ate and what I didn't eat. I began to start drinking less soda and more water, right? Like, I began to think about other things. One of the funny things about this is I could swim before, like, I was like, okay. I'm not a great swimmer. So when I first got in there, the ladies, I took some lessons. So the lady's like, hey, why don't you show us what you got? And so I go in and I'm splashing around just as best I can. I get to the other side and she's like, okay, so we're going to start from the beginning, so let's stay in this side. And so I was in a kiddie pool, holding my breath and sticking my, just putting my, and then as I pushed through that and learned how to swim, then another great thing is there's pool swimming and then there's open water swimming, which is a whole nother ball game, right? And so you put on a wetsuit that feels like you're like Batman outside, but then inside it, like you're like I felt like I was being drowned. I felt like I was drowning, and so I had to grow past these points that were very difficult and stretching me both mentally and physically. And really there was times where I hurt my knee a little bit and I had to make adjustments and it was very, like if you looked at my training, if you like highlighted it, you'd see this 45-year-old man like suffering through these awkward transitions and moments. You'd be like, what is he doing? Like, why is he trying this? Because I had a mission. I wanted to finish that half Ironman, and I began to focus on that, and then I began every day, looking at my calendar and focusing, spending time running, spending time swimming, spending time riding a bike, and so that focus not only cost me time and energy, but it began to it was awkward many times. It was super awkward, and even when I was running, there was one point where I was clocking so fast, I think I was going 14-minute miles, but I made it. And I made a few rules as I was doing this, okay? So you're like, how did you finish? I'll tell you how I finished. I made two big rules. One, I wasn't going to stop pedaling. You're like, wow, you're a genius, Shawn. I was like, I know. It took me a lot of time to think of that one. I decided I was never going to stop pedaling. So I didn't stop pedaling the whole way. And I eventually got done. Your second rule, what was that one? Genius, boy? Okay, I'll tell you. My second rule was I wasn't going to walk. I was going to jog or run the whole time on that. And those seem like simple, practical things, but that's exactly how I finished what I set out to do. And I finished. And so you say, what is that in reaching out? I actually have a couple rules as well. As we've come here, one thing that God has really, I don't know what I'm doing at all. But one thing that I think if you're around me long enough, I'm swinging for the fences every time. Every time we come, we figure out how to reach somebody. We're trying to figure out how to reach in this context, how to walk with people, how to be in the schools, how to connect the gospel with the community that we live in as best we know how. And sometimes we blow it, sometimes I strike out, but I'm telling you, we swing for the fences every time. And there's two things that I believe that if we get as a church, we will do what the Bible says to go and to make disciples. We'll fulfill the goal that we have set before us. You say, what is those two things? Again, it's really mind-blowing and super difficult, but not really, okay? It's just simple, practical things. If we reach out to people and walk with them in life and share the hope in Christ, I believe we'll see people come to Christ. We just reach out. It's like, who do we reach out to? Our neighbors, the people that live next to us, the people we work with, the people that are around us. That's really what it is. We reach out, and then this is the big one. And if we do two things, so if we reach out to people, we just consistently reach out to people. So this week, instead of thinking, I have nothing to do this week, we're going to be intentional, and we're going to find the people that God's placed in our life. We don't have to even go far. It could be a neighbor. It could be a friend. It could be somebody that's close to us. It could be someone we meet in the park. So, however that is. Number two is we follow up. If we do those two things, if we reach out and we follow up, I believe we'll see people come to know Jesus and we can make disciples. We follow up. If we walk with people. You know how many times, have you ever had there's one guy that I just really didn't like. I didn't like him at all. He's kind of an arrogant guy. It's no one here, so don't be worried. But he was kind of an arrogant guy. And I was sitting there one day just kind of having, it was a Monday morning, and I was kind of had some stuff to do, and I got this phone call, and I got his number. I was like, I don't want to talk to this guy. Picked up the phone anyway, and the guy's like, hey, I just want to let you know, I was thinking about you. And I hope you have a great day, man. I'm like, well, thank you. It was like one of those moments that, man, all he did is follow up with me. Just reach out and follow up. And I'm now a fan of his. I call him every so often, just check on him. And again, most people don't like him, but I really do because he took the time to reach out to me, follow up to see how I was doing. And I'm telling you, it works. Now, we try to find all these plans and all these ideas. We do all these crazy, great things. The truth is, if we just reach out, follow up, we'll see people come to Christ. So I want to give us an example. So one thing we say here is reaching out is never easy. It's never easy. We're going to talk about how Jesus walked through this situation. It was not an easy situation, awkward conversation, but God did some amazing stuff through this. But it is the mission. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? Like everybody would be out reaching out to people. Every church would be full to the brim if we were all doing this. But it's not easy. It's not hard. It's not complicated. But it is sacrificial. It is difficult because, again, the people that we reach out to, you're like, okay, look, that guy looks normal. And you're like, no, my gosh, that guy's not normal, But the truth is, you're probably not that normal as you think you are as well, right? Like, if we are really honest, if someone was trying to connect with you and try to walk with you in life, like, you're probably not as easy as you think you are. You're probably kind of stubborn. You have your own ways. And, and so to be intentional in this, I think those are a few things that we have to do. So it's not easy, but it is the mission. Again, that's why it's so important to be settled on what the goal is. What is the goal? What is the goal? When you think about your own personal accomplishments and when you think about your life, what is the goal? Well, my goal is to make much of Jesus as best I can. Is to share the gospel. Really, what we've nailed it down to, if we have 196 gospel conversations and duplicate ourselves, we will see 1% of the Northwest reached in the next 10 years. Like, we've honed it down. Like, we know what we want to do. And so in John chapter 4, Jesus, he was always on mission, right? Like he's a perfect example. Now, again, we're not Jesus, but we can learn some things here today that will help us as we walk with people, as we move out from our comfort zone into those that are far from God or don't know God, those that are there. Again, I think one thing that might help you, the people we're trying to reach are a lot like us more than we want to admit. We're not better than them. Like, they're just people just trying to make it. And what Jesus brings out here is he had something that this person needed. And so this is a pretty familiar chapter of the Bible in John. It's the woman at the well, where Jesus meets the woman at the well. And a couple things I just want to bring out in this. So in verse 1 of chapter 4 of John, it says, "Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples." So Jesus, the Son of God, duplicated himself and reached more people doing that. So that's a good thing to think through, right? But we will just kind of skip through that. Although he left Judea and departed into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. So there was some racial tension between Judea and Samaria, and most Jews didn't go through Samaria. They would go around Samaria. And so Jesus, though, I love what he says, he had to. So when we think about on mission, so if I was to fulfill the mission of completing the task that I'd set before myself, I had to exercise every day, or it wouldn't be done, right? And so Jesus was on mission. He had to go out of his way to meet the woman that he was going to meet. He had to. It says he had to pass through Samaria. You think about had. Every time my kid's like, I have to. It's like, really, do you have to? Do you have to? Well, if that's your mission, right? When it's the mission, nothing else matters. I think the thing that will help you is if you clarify what your real mission is. So if your real mission is to veg and to enjoy Netflix again, what's your real mission? What is the mission that you think that one day you're going to be accountable for? That's what matters, right? And so you have to make some adjustments. So not only that, we see his intentionality, and then we see a commitment, right? There was a commitment. There was a focus. Now, the disciples didn't know why they had to go, but he knew. In verse 5, it says, "So when he came to the town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field of Jacob, even had given to his son Joseph, Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour." So it was late in the day. It's hot. He was tired. So one thing that we see about the mission is never easy or convenient. That's why it's the mission, right? So one thing I always say, I was like, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So there's something that God's given you to do. There's a task, and again, the task is to go make disciples. So reaching out is what we've been called to do. So it's not easy, it's not convenient, but it is simple. What does he do? He knew where he had to be, and he goes there, and he was tired. Now, You know, that's always when the mission starts, right? Like you just like work a full day. You're just like tired. And you're like, oh, God, I just kind of take a moment. And sure enough, the person that you love to talk to called you, right? Or there's a moment, right? There's a moment. There's always that. It's never easy. And many times in those moments, like, well, I don't have time for that today, or I don't have that. And what we do is we substitute what the mission God has for us and to replace it for something else, right? And so it's very easy. But Jesus was wearied, and so he was tired. And so he sat there, and it was a 6 hours, it was high noon. So it was hot, it was tired. And then verse 7, it says, the woman Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. And so he begins this conversation. So again, just as we kind of get back, we see that the mission was intentional. There was an intentionality that he must go. If we are to fulfill what God calls us to do, there's a must-go attitude. And you say, where's that must-go happen? So you can live the same life that you would do normally, but what if you did it with intentionality? What if you actually thought through what tomorrow looked like today? What if you thought through, what if you visualized and just took a moment and said, you know, what is it going to be like when I sit in that park tomorrow or I give out the snow cones? Instead of having this, oh my gosh, snow cones, but have a smile on my face, just be intentional. Maybe it's going to work at the same job you've done for so long that you're so tired of the same job, the same boss, but you came not because you had to, but because it was a mission opportunity that you could walk with people in life and share the hope in Christ. What if it was dealing with that very difficult person with intentionality? Instead of just complaining and griping, but saying, you know what? This is the mission. And my job, simple as it is never stop pedaling, which means in church world, reaching out. It's reaching out. And so instead of saying, you know what? The person asks for a favor, you're like, do your job. Why don't you just do your job? It's your job. Do it. So you know what? I can help you do that. And just have a different, whoa, I know, it's crazy. What is he talking? What is the scandalous things this preacher's talking about? I know, reaching out. When we take it away from outreach programming to real common sense reaching out to people, we see in the scripture, Jesus had a place to go, knew why he was going there, and was prepared for probably the most awkward conversation you'd ever have in your whole life. So high noon, this woman shows up, and she's about to get some water, and he's like, hey, could you get me a glass of water? And she's like, what, you don't have this? And so we read it really in verses 8 through 26. I'm not going to read detail of that, just give you a highlight. So it's awkward. I don't know, have you ever had some awkward conversations, like just things you just wish that would go away? When you read this, to me, just the cringe factor goes up, because here he is. Okay, again, what we believe biblically, he is the Son of God, asking this woman that had been with 7 men, who really lived an opposite lifestyle. She had a different religion, a different background, all these barriers in this conversation. And Jesus begins to walk with where she's at, simply love her for where she's at, and then deals with truth and grace in a way that very few Baptists know how to do, right? I mean, seriously, he was delicate, he was kind, he wasn't judgy, he was sensitive, and she looked for every reason not to listen to him, but she couldn't get away that he knew everything about her, and he did it in a way that was honoring and loving to her, that she wanted what he had. Because he said, listen, I'll give you water that you'll never thirst again. And she was tired of going late in the afternoon with away from all those gossipy women and have to dip from that. She was willing to deal with what she had to deal with so she could get the true water of living water. She could get that. And so it was awkward, though. Anytime we're intentional and we begin a few things are going to happen. It's going to be awkward, and you're going to be weary. But that's the opportunity you have to reach out. So just guarantee, just so you say, man, I always say, no good deed goes unpunished. You do something nice. My wife was making some pasta yesterday, and she was in the kitchen. I hear, all the pasta hit the floor. And she's like, ugh. And then about 5 minutes later, the sugar hit the floor. She's like, I'm done. She's like, I don't know why I try to do these things for people, right? Do you ever feel that way? If you don't, I'm telling you what, just this week, say, I'm going to do something nice for somebody that asks me. If they ask me, I'm going to do something. They don't even ask me. I'm going to look for opportunities to be nice to people. I'm going to do it. And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be not the way you plan it. Right now, you're going to be like, I'm going to walk in, and they're going to see me as a hero, and they're going to be like, oh, you're so amazing. They're not. They're like, oh, why did you do that? The coffee's lukewarm. Like, how could you? And you're like, why did I ever do this for you, right? Again, but that's the mission. It doesn't matter how it feels. It's the mission. Jesus knew that it was going to be an awkward conversation. He didn't waver from the truth. He didn't love he didn't love her any less. And he said, remember, he was intentional and he was determined, and he knew that he must go through Samaria because it's the mission. So we continue on. And so reaching out is never easy, but it is the mission. And so again, I would just you say, so the question would be, what is my mission? Does my mission line up with what Jesus' mission is? That's something that I want to always begin to question and think through. So we see this. Not only that, I think one of the cool things about this is Jesus was prepared for this mission. And so I think there is a preparation that comes. So as I was doing the Ironman, one thing that was really cool, and I observed this through the process, okay? So I was really not prepared. I was really not prepared for what I got myself into. And there was a few moments of like, man, I'm not really prepared for this. That's what I thought to myself, okay? So, but this is what God did. So there was a couple things that I happened to, and I saw this so clearly in my life, how God prepared me for that moment. So we were there, and the weather was not what we expected. We thought it was going to be, again, July, Father's Day was towards the end of July. I thought it was going to be really hot. Well, up on the top, it was about 30 degrees. So it was super cold, and down below was 60, sunny, beautiful. Up on top of the mountain was super cold and 30 degrees, and so was not prepared for that. But I went, there was this information meeting where you could listen to two people that had done the race, and I really didn't want to go, but I thought I would go. There was also a guy I met about a year ago that had done a triathlon and was actually doing this one. He did a different one, but he was going to do it, and he had prepared, and he actually got second in the Olympics, so he knew what he was talking about. So as I'm going to that event where I'm going to listen to those experts, he happens to be there, and I see him. And so I talked to him, and this is where I realized I wasn't prepared as well as I should be. Because he's like, hey, did you check the water? I was like, no. He's like, hey, did you ride the course? I was like, no. Have you run the trail? No. And I thought, I don't know if I'm prepared. Now, looking back, I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have psyched myself out. So ignorance is kind of bliss at times, but he was very prepared. I was not quite so prepared, but that kind of made me more attentive, okay? So that was the first thing. God helped me be attentive. So we go to this meeting, and these guys were like, they made a comment. It's like, I had fingerless gloves, so I could feel my hands, and so usually you ride, and when it's warmer weather, it's more comfortable. Well, they're like, you need full gloves. And so I was like, I'm not prepared. And then the guy said, he's like, one thing, he said another thing. The guy was like, when you run, he's like two things. He's like, you're not going to feel your feet for the first few miles. He was absolutely true. You don't feel your feet the first few miles when you run. Like I didn't feel they were numb. He's like, but go slow. And he's like, one thing I do is I dry my feet off really carefully and put on wool socks. Note to self, I was not ready for that. Like I thought I had little booties, and I was like, I'll be fine. So I did that. So I had wool socks, and I dried my feet off, and so those were some things. So we went to that, got the gloves. The next morning, the guy's like, look, it's snowing up on top of the mountain. You need to be prepared. And so I'm like, So my wife had a windbreaker. I had like a sweater on, and I'm like, swap me. And I didn't care if it was fluorescent pink. Thankfully, it was black, so it looked cooler, right? But whatever it was, I was prepared. I get mocked a lot by my layers. So if you see me, I always have 2 shirts on, sometimes 3, 4, sometimes 5. I'm not kidding. Like, I have a lot of layers. That moment, so I had decided the night before that I was going to put all these layers. So I had my running shirt, and I put the number because it was going to block the wind. I put another triathlete suit thing on. I put a sweater on, and then I had another sweater which I changed to a windbreaker. So I definitely, I thought, man, if I get hot, I'll just unzip it all, or I'll throw it out. I'll litter in Oregon, right? Don't quote me on that, but whatever I have to do, but I'll be prepared. So final thing that God did for me is we were walking to the swimming part, and as we were going, these 4 guys were chatting really loud. And they were talking about how last year was super cold. And I just was listening. I'm a very good eavesdropper, so don't talk in front of me, because I'll be like, right? So I was listening. The guy's like, I was so cold, I had to stay on the other side for about 30 minutes and warm up. And he's like, and once I warmed up, I was fine. And so as I was going over to him, I was like, and I just remember that guy saying that, and I'm like, I'm going to do that when I get there. I'm going to get down. And so I go down to the thing. The guy's like, are you quitting? And I'm like, nope. I didn't know that you could quit at that moment. I was just kind of in my own zone. So I was like, nope. And I don't know why I told him this, but I was like, I'm going to go to the bathroom and eat my waffle. I had a little waffle cake. And he looked at me like, why are you telling me that? And I'm like, and I thought to myself, why am I telling you that? So I did that. And then I ate my waffle. It was like frozen. I'm all eating my waffle. And the guy's looking at me. And then I go off and he's like, okay, and there we go again. And so I just left. But all of that was preparation. And so you know what I think through that when I think on mission, like, if you know your mission and your mission's reaching out, God's going to give you the things in the morning in the vision. If you say, today, Lord, I'm going to lay my yes down. I'm going to listen. And I'm going to look for opportunities in front of me. And I'm going to find the lady at the well. I'm going to find the people that you placed in my life. And I'm going to lay it all aside. I'm not going to have my own intentions. I'm going to be on mission. Now, again, it's going to be far more difficult than you think it is in this idea. But if you always are on mission, those tips. Now, all those tips could have happened and me just miss all of them because I didn't know what the mission was. But if I wanted to finish the race, I knew what the mission was. And if I want to finish the race, I know what the mission is. I need to listen and be prepared for that. Jesus was fair. He was prepared. Every question she asked about other religion, why Judaism was, or why he thought that he was better than that way, to a point where she recognized, wait a minute, you know more than I do. You are the Messiah. Like there's something more. And we see that clearly that it comes down to in verse 29. It says, so this is what she walks away from the disciples show up. She goes back to home, and this is what she says. Verse 29, she says, come and see a man who told me all that I ever did. And all these guys were sweating, like, what do you mean all you ever did? Like, he said, can this be the Christ? And they went out to the town and were coming to him. And so here he was. She had this very awkward conversation, but what God was doing in her heart, what Jesus had done, he planted a seed to begin her to recognize there was something more because of this conversation. In verse 39, it says, many Samaritans from the town believed in him. Why? Because of the woman's testimony. See, a lot of times when you're on mission, you think it's about you. It's really not about you. Do you know that? Like the mission isn't about you. It's not your mission. It's God's mission, and he's going to fulfill the mission he has set before us. Now, the beautiful thing about it is we can have a part in that. We can have a part in the mission that God has for us. And so we just have to be willing to reach out to those. And so this woman who heard this, she went back home on mission. So maybe today you have heard that there's hope and there's a relationship you can have with Christ, and you can go to your friends and family and to those that you know, and you can be on mission for them, as she tells them. And so it told me all that I did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed for 2 days. And when many believed because of his word. In verse 42, and they said to the woman, this is the goal. Our goal is to be a disciple-making church. We want to walk with people in life so they know Jesus, be known, and own their faith, and bring someone with them. So as I share what God has done in my life, and I share and I reach out to you, and I love you where you're at, and I don't expect you to be any more than you are, but just to walk with you step by step through the journey with you, that you will come to know the God that I know. That's what she did. It says, they said to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said we believe. It's no longer what you said what we believe. Why? He says, for we have heard ourselves. Comes a point where they own it themselves and they share it with those that they know. And so that's what we want. We want to walk with people where they're at. We want to reach out the best we know how. Again, we want to go through that intentionality, that flexibility, that willingness to go and not have our way win all the time, but we're going to walk with them where they are. So again, what a beautiful picture of what it means to reach out. It's not rocket science. I think what we try to do a lot of times with most stuff, and I'm guilty of this a lot of times, is I make it so complex that I have a great excuse not to do it. Man, if we make it all hard, if I have to go do all these things and know all this information, do this, man, I just can't do that. But man, when you make it so easy, did anybody? So this is what most people get when they hear that I've done Half Ironman. Man, if Shawn could do it, surely I can do that. And you know what? You're right. You're right. You know, you can make disciples. Why? Just being intentional, being willing to step out of some of those uncomfortable moments, can know that the mission matters more than your comfort. The mission matters more. And those people, man, what a life that was changed. That woman that had a terrible reputation helped walk people through the change reality of their situation. She wasn't perfect. She didn't have everything put in place or everything all planned, but what she did, she was willing to go in uncomfortable moments and say, listen, I know a guy that told me everything I knew. And I'm like, man, that's crazy. How do we know that, right? And so all I'm saying is we can do hard things. We can do difficult things. It's not, reaching out is never easy. It's not easy. Every time I go out and try to meet new people, if Shawn had his way, I would go hide under a rock. And, there's times I have to go home and just like lay in my hammock for like an hour and just like, oh, there's days after church I go home and I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody, right? But you know why I do it? It's not because I'm awesome. It's not because, wow, Shawn, you're so good. No, it's not. That's far from that. It's because there was a day, just like that lady, I was at the well. And I was alone and far from God. And someone was kind enough and loving enough to reach out to me and share the hope that was in their life. As they shared the hope of life, man, I recognized that I was indeed thirsty and needed something more than any of this thing this world could ever offer. And I best I knew how, I gave my life and my hope to Jesus Christ. And he changed everything about me. And he's still faithfully walking with me, even as I'm a knucklehead and not always where I should be. He's been good to me. It's not because I'm awesome. It's because God is gracious and kind and loving and forgiving. And I have, just like that woman, well, I don't have much to tell you, but I can tell you that he changed my life. And he can do the same for you. And he can do the same for the people that you live next to, the people that you work with, the people that are far from God, the people that you're like, man, not that guy. Nobody can change that guy. That's not true. That's not true. I bet you if we lived in that town in Samaria, we'd be like, that woman at the well that goes there at noon, nobody can change that lady. Not a soul. That's not true. You know why? Because Jesus can change anybody. And how does he do it? By those that know him simply reaching out in a loving way and reaching out and telling them about what God has done in their life. Just loving them. We have a system here. We pray for them. We be in prayer. We listen. We eat. We all love that, right? We eat with them. We bring them into our life. That's what they want. People want friends. They want to be brought in your life. You serve them. You find ways where you can serve them, and you simply share what God has done in your life. And I'm telling you, you'll be amazed what God can do as we simply stop doing outreach and start reaching out. Is it easy? No, but it is the mission. It is the mission. Let's pray. Every head bowed, every eye closed. We thank you so, God. We thank you so much that we have so much to thank you for. We thank you for what you have accomplished in and through our lives. We thank you that you matter. God and Lord, as we prepare to reach out into the community, as we do the different projects we do this week, as we are really intentional. Lord, this isn't just a July thing for us. This is an every week, every day opportunity for us. Lord, help us to have eyes to see. Help us to have ears to hear. Help us to be willing to be obedient and faithful. Lord, maybe those that we are to reach out are not far from us. Maybe they're even here today. Help us to be faithful. Help us to just look for those opportunities. God, I just thank you for sending laborers to reach into the community, for giving us a love for this community. I pray for the people that we will serve this week. I pray for the families we'll reach out to. I thank you for those that we live next to. I've just got it. Lord, none of this is by accident. All of this is with purpose, and Lord, you have a plan. Lord, we thank you for the mission you've set before us. We're to make disciples. We're to help people take their next step. And God, you've put people in our life that we know individually, personally, and we're to do this. And so we just ask you, God, that you just help us to have the faith, the trust, and the willingness to do what you've called us to do. Help us be a church that reaches out. That if they say anything about Living Hope Church, man, that church will reach out to you and care for you and lovingly walk with you where you're at and share the hope that we have in Jesus. We just thank you for that. We thank you for the opportunity. We give you all the praise. Thank you for the challenge this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. If you'd stand with us as we sing.